The kitchen faucet let out a dry, guttural moan, like a machine gasping its last. Not a single drop fell. I figured it was a clogged pipe, something I could wrench loose in an hour. But then I glanced out the window and saw Eleanor across the street in Pine Hollow, Georgia, on a blistering August 3rd, 2026, hosing her award-winning hydrangeas with a sleek new hose, sipping lime-infused water like she was lounging at a resort. A cold dread twisted in my gut. The heartbeat of my farm, my goats, and the Laurel County Fire Station's emergency supply had never failed in 15 years. Now, my tanks were empty, my goats bleated in distress, and the familiar hum of my pumps was silent. I stormed to the well shed, only to find a gleaming padlock and a laminated tag zip-tied to the handle, stamped with the Pine Hollow Homeowners Association logo. Eleanor caught my eye and smirked, like she'd just won a bet I didn't know we were placing. With a casual wave of her hose, she dropped the bomb. The HOA had shut off my well to promote equitable water use. She didn't know my well was the linchpin for the fire department's upcoming wildfire drill, a lifeline for the whole community. It was 7:30 a.m., and my day was already spiraling. I stood there, fists tight, heart pounding, staring at that padlock. This wasn't just my water. This was the water source, legally tied to the fire station by a contract I'd signed 5 years ago after a fire nearly swallowed the hillside. They'd built an emergency pump on my land, capable of pulling thousands of gallons an hour when wildfires loomed in the dry season. And Eleanor had cut it off because she thought my vegetable patch was too green. I called the HOA office voicemail, naturally. I drove to their cramped headquarters, only to find a scribbled sign taped to the door, closed for HOA Water Committee review. Water Committee? That was new, and it screamed Eleanor's handiwork. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed Tom, a rare voice of reason on the HOA board. His voice was hushed, like he was dodging a spy. He said Eleanor had crowned herself head of an emergency water task force, claiming drought conditions gave the HOA power to ration water. When I asked how they could touch a private well, he sighed. She said the community voted via email. Except no one on the board remembered getting one. Back home, my goats pawed at empty troughs, their cries sharp with thirst. My irrigation timers flashed red, and my tomatoes and squash were wilting under the sun's glare. This wasn't a minor annoyance, it was theft, sabotage, and a reckless gamble with public safety. I grabbed my fire department contract and utility maps and sped to the fire station. The fire chief, Mike, met me with a confused frown. "You shut off the well already?" My stomach dropped. "What?" He explained that his crew had stopped by that morning to test the pump for next week's controlled burn drill. It wouldn't pull a drop. "We thought you were doing maintenance," he said. I shook my head, voice tight. Eleanor locked me out of my own well shed. Mike's face hardened, no smile, no chuckle. He led me to his office, where I handed over the contract. "This well is in our emergency response plan," he said, voice like steel. "If it's down for the drill, we might have to cancel or worse, delay response if a real fire starts." The stakes sank in. A parched summer, bone-dry brush, high winds on the forecast, and now a crippled water source because Eleanor wanted her flowers to steal the show. Mike tried calling the HOA voicemail again. He warned that if the well wasn't back online in 48 hours, he'd file a county complaint and possibly issue a neighborhood safety alert. "People don't mess with emergency infrastructure," he said. "Not unless they want legal trouble." That evening, I confronted Eleanor as she swept leaves off her driveway, dressed in a sun hat and floral apron like she was starring in a gardening commercial. I asked, barely keeping calm, why she'd shut off my well. She beamed, proud as ever. "We can't have one person hogging water while the rest of us can serve," she said. "Your sprinklers run every morning. It's selfish." I explained the goats, the crops, the fire department's reliance. She shrugged. "They should have applied to the HOA like everyone else." I told her about the legal contract, that the well was on deeded land, untouchable by her rules. She rolled her eyes, muttered about entitled farmers, and walked away. I didn't sleep, poring over legal documents instead. My deed, older than the HOA, exempted my well from their control. I printed everything: the deed, the fire contract, the pump permits, the engineering plans. I highlighted every clause and made copies. By dawn, I dropped a thick packet on the HOA's desk. The receptionist recoiled like I'd handed her a live grenade. An hour later, Tom called. Eleanor's livid. She's claiming your well taps HOA infrastructure, but we know that's nonsense. I was there when you got that permit. Then he dropped a bombshell. There was no vote to shut off my well. Eleanor had fabricated it in a record, no email, nothing. This wasn't just petty, it was fraud, abuse of power, and a threat to public safety. That afternoon, a block number called. Another board member, Clara, whispered nervously. Eleanor's planning to say your water use is illegal and the fire contract's fake. She's forging documents for the next meeting. Why? Her garden's up for a state landscaping award next week, and she needs extra water. I was stunned. She'd crippled an emergency well for her hydrangeas. This was dangerous, selfish, and unhinged. But Eleanor didn't know I had the fire department, my deed, and her own board turning against her. The clock was ticking 48 hours until the drill, 48 hours to unlock my well, or Eleanor's floral empire might burn. By sunrise, I was at the Laurel County Records office, digging through dusty files. Every document confirmed my well was private, drilled in the 90s on land that was a ranch before Pine Hollow's houses sprouted. The HOA didn't exist until 2011, so their rules didn't apply. I scanned everything and emailed copies to Mike, bracing for a legal fight. Back home, a new sign was staked near my gate. Water violator excessive use. HOA citation 472. My address was in bold red, with a QR code linking to a shaming page on the HOA website, listing my name and fake violations. Below it, Eleanor's photo, smiling beside her hydrangeas, labeled model conservationist. My blood boiled. This was defamation. My goats were without water. I'd hauled in emergency tanks, but it was a stopgap. My crops were failing, a season's work at risk. I couldn't touch the padlock without legal trouble, so I called Rachel, an agricultural lawyer I'd worked with before. She said, "That's interference with private land and a breach of a public contract." 2 winnable lawsuits. She advised getting the HOA to admit who authorized the lock. I requested an emergency HOA meeting, citing my fire contract. They tried to delay, but I fired back. The fire department depends on this well. The meeting was set for Friday. Mike faced his own crisis. The backup water site had failed, making my well the only source. If it stayed offline, the drill and the region's fire readiness would be at risk. Mike was ready to issue an emergency legal notice if things didn't resolve by Thursday. Eleanor was about to face more than just me. Thursday, an HOA flyer hit every mailbox, announcing a water ethics committee accusing my farm of stealing groundwater. But Eleanor hadn't counted on neighbors snapping. George, a retiree who'd lived here since the land was subdivided, brought me 2009 zoning maps showing my land outside HOA boundaries. That night, Clara called. Eleanor's claiming a unanimous vote to curb high-usage properties. No record exists, she faked it. I asked if she'd testify. If it's legal, maybe, she whispered. She'll ruin me otherwise. Friday's HOA meeting was electric, packed with residents. Eleanor strutted in with a binder, opening with a speech about eco-justice. When my turn came, I held up my deed, the fire contract, and the county's water map, asking, "What authority lets you shut off a public safety resource?" Eleanor claimed the well used HOA funds. False. The contract was invalid, wrong, and my farm was illegal, grandfathered. Then Tom stood. "Eleanor, stop lying. There was no vote. You faked the minutes and locked private property. That's abuse of power." The room gasped. Eleanor's allies slipped out. The HOA president, Victor, reversed the shutdown pending review. Eleanor stormed out, but the tide had turned. Saturday, the fire department accessed the well. The broken padlock lay in the dirt, replaced by a county lock. Testing succeeded, but Tom texted, "Eleanor's planning something for the drill." Wants headlines. My stomach churned. What was she capable of? Sunday's drill was high stakes, with crews, medics, and media. Eleanor arrived with a megaphone and protect our water shirts, screaming about ecological crimes. A deputy stopped her from crossing the fire line. The burn began perfectly until a wind shift sent flames toward the neighborhood. Mike ordered full pump engagement, and my well delivered. But uncleared shrubs caught fire. As crews fought, Eleanor sprinted across the line and yanked the pumps shut off. For 3 seconds, water stopped. Flames leapt toward her own backyard. Crews restored flow, but a firefighter tripped, and a shed nearly burned. Deputies cuffed Eleanor as neighbors cheered. Mike filed a report recommending charges for obstructing emergency services. I filed lawsuits against Eleanor for trespass, defamation, and interference, and against the HOA for negligence. The story hit the news. HOA member risks homes in water feud. Eleanor's arrest footage went viral. Neighbors shared her petty tyranny's fines for lawn decor, threats over flower beds. Her countersuit was dismissed. At an HOA meeting, I showed the pump footage and asked, "How many risks will you take with her in charge?" The board stripped her of power and apologized. She stormed out, humiliated. Eleanor's garden withered. Her house went up for sale, and she faced a county investigation for misusing HOA funds on her garden. My lawsuit sought $90,000 for losses. The HOA settled with the fire department, and a new water policy prevented overreach. I hosted a cookout for the fire crew and neighbors, with a cake reading the well that saved us. Mike said my well was now a top priority resource. Standing by my troughs, a fire crew sign read, "Community Lifeline." Eleanor was a cautionary tale, and justice was served. Was Eleanor a tyrant or a misguided idealist? Should HOAs control private resources? How far would you go to protect your property? Comment, like, subscribe.